Wysteria, energy, twister. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are actually still on the same book, that is The Love of Christmas. This tale's called The Ice Bridge by Jane Cooper. Clementine traced the delicate fern pattern across the window pane with her finger. Beyond it was blue sky, as cloudless as a July afternoon. The fields were blanketed in thick white snow, glinting in the sunlight as if sprinkled with crushed diamonds. The black silhouettes of trees were made cheery by their cotton wool cloaks. Lights twinkled in the windows of distant farmhouse. She opened her eyes and sighed, ugly as it was. The grimy city, crouched in darkness on the other side of glass, could not dull the beauty of the ice fern, however hard it tried. A large crow landed on the deep sill and rapped on the window with its sharp black beak. She raised a finger to her lips to signal it to be quiet, and turned to look at her roommate. Satisfied that Patricia was still lost in dreams, she opened the window a crack. Freezing air flooded through the gap. She didn't want to lose what little heat the room retained, for Patricia's sake. She frowned at the crow. "Crawford, what are you doing here?" The crow fixed her with the beady black eyes and cawed. "Where? Two caws are too loud. You can't keep it down." "Why can't crows do nothing quietly? I asked for a little red-breasted robin with a pretty singing voice." She glanced again at the dirty black buildings beyond the sill, wearing their layers of soot with brooding resentment in the moonlight. "But then, I asked for a countryside posting as well." "There aren't many children's homes in the countryside," said Crawford. Clementine knew Patricia would only hear the cause, but it was a risk even so. "Let's go then, if we must. But I don't see why it couldn't have waited until morning. He said you'd be awake. And there's less chance you'll be missed at this time. Where's your Jackson ring?" She hurried to her bed and felt beneath her thin mattress for the tiny hole she made in the lining. It was usual to wear the ring at all times, but she couldn't do that here. It would be confiscated and pawned within an hour. The intricate silver filigree gleamed in the moonlight as she retrieved the ring and slid it onto her finger. Hastening back to the window, she opened it wider for Crawford to hop through, then closed it again to keep Patricia as warm as she could. She touched the ring to a smaller one around Crawford's right leg, and a familiar rush began. She had heard others say they found the experience unpleasant, even sickening, but she found it exhilarating. The world contracted into a pinprick, and she was surrounded by a blur of colours before they faded to complete blackness. She always wished it lasted longer, but it was over in moments. She plumped down into the snow, and the crow landed, relatively gracefully beside her. "Why can't we never land inside the palace?" she grumbled. She had to concede that the view of Crystal Ice Palace from this distance was almost worth the journey. It was dawn here, and the first week sunrays glinted off the tops of the magnificent towers, making them sparkle in the clear air. Later in the day, as the sun rose higher in the sky, the whole place would glitter like a cathedral made of diamonds. They trudged through the snow, and by the time they reached the palace, tendrils of weariness were creeping around Clementine's legs. They were shown into the frost hall and told to wait. The frost hall was Clementine's favourite room in the palace, where the outside of the palace was sleek, carved from sheet ice. The frost hall was rimmed with the thickest and most spectacular hoarfrost that existed anywhere in the world. It was her brother's most accomplished work of art, and a labour of love. Every time she came here, there was a new wonder to see, a new carving, a new structure, a new intricacy. He would never stop working on the hall. "Sister!" he boomed, the sound echoing to high ceilings. She was astonished at the delicate icicles, that they weren't shaken from their homes and released like beautiful daggers by the vibrations of his voice every time he spoke. "It's the middle of the night, Jack," she chided, but she let him embrace her. She had many brothers, but he was her favourite. We need to bring the arrangements forward, he said. She frowned. This was her first time she was ever going to be nervous. Not everything in its place? The winter is harsher than ever we expected. We must move sooner. Do the children not suffer? She sighed. Yes. They are hungry and cold, so cold. As a frost, she didn't feel the cold, but hated to see the children shivering. She couldn't remember it. But coldness looked so uncomfortable. Then we'd take them sooner. We need new sprites immediately, and their torment need not be prolonged. When? When? Tomorrow night. You remember the procedure? Not clearly. It was almost 70 years since she'd been taken, and it had seemed no more than a dream at that time. You must gather the children together. Crawford will herald my arrival. From then, you will have a few moments. The bridge will appear, and they must cross willingly. And if they won't, then you must leave them behind, I'm afraid. Wow, that's so sad, actually. Thinking about it, because it's more of a story of children in torment that they're trying to save. We'll go straight on to part 2, actually. Why not? Back in her room, Clementine watched Patricia's sleeping face. Slumber was the only time Patricia was happy, the only time she wasn't freezing or starving. It made Clementine's heart ache, and Patricia still hoped her mother would come for her. Every night, Clementine waited for Patricia to fall asleep, and then laid her own blanket on Patricia's bed. She had slept so much better for the extra warmth. As dawn broke, something tinkled in the street below, and Clementine looked down at a large fir tree, on the cart being pulled by a stocky horse with tiny silver bells on his bridle. Christmas. So sparse was the joy here that she had forgotten it was upon them. Tears prickled her eyes. No one would be left behind in this terrible place. As the day wore on, grey snow lined the dirty streets outside the children's home. The children shivered in their thin tunics until supper and then headed upstairs to their rooms. Most homes had dormitories, not here. Social connection was not encouraged, and although there were only 20 in number, it was a challenge to gather the children together. But to them, she was a child herself, and they trusted her, so they came. But every child was terrified of being caught and punished, and she explained. She saw confusion, though, hesitant faces, fear in their eyes, but also hope. She had so little time to persuade them, but that silver of hope, that freedom, could be theirs, won her their consent to cross the bridge. All except Patricia, who set her thin little face in a determined expression and folded her bony arms. My mother might yet come for me. There was a rap on the window. Crawford, it was time. Please, Patricia, Clementine begged. She could not bear to leave anyone here, but especially not Patricia. There was a loud cracking sound and movements of ice. The bridge began building itself icicle by icicle, frozen brick by brick, as if it were growing from the next room through the wall. The children gasped, so in awe they didn't notice the further drop in temperature. Jack appeared, striding over the bridge, resplendent in pale blue robes and dazzling ice crown. He opened his arms and the children walked towards him, over the bridge, disappearing through the wall, which was now shimmering like a silver curtain. Please, Patricia, Clementine begged again. The little girl stared at Jack in wonder, and Clementine's own hazy memories of the moment she had done the same before became clearer. Tears began to stream down Patricia's face. My mother isn't coming, is she? No, I'm sorry. No. There was a noise from the corridor, footsteps. Now, Clementine, cried Jack. The bridge was beginning to creak and fade. She grabbed Patricia's tiny frozen hand and looked pleadingly into her blue eyes. Patricia nodded, and Clementine ran as fast as she could, pulling Patricia behind her, leaping onto the fading bridge. There was one last loud crack, and all was still. The end. Of course, you can actually find the full story at janecooperbooks.com and find out what happened to the children when they crossed the bridge. This is only a bite-sized version of it, as usual. But yeah, I like that story. They were taking the children to something far better than where they were at, let's put it that way. Thank you so much for listening, and many blessings. Wysteria, energy, twister.